That the celebration of the Passover was discontinued along with the law of Moses after the great atoning sacrifice of Jesus Christ does not preclude the possibility of a second Passover event. In fact, due to the fact that the apocalypse is a rerun of the Exodus, another Passover is to be expected. The Lord informed the Latter-day Saints in a revelation called the Word of Wisdom that such a Passover would occur in conjunction with the events of the Second Coming. He made it explicit that the destroying angel would pass by modern Israel as it did for Israel of the time of Moses. John's revelation describes the second Passover. Of course, he doesn't name it as a second Passover, nor does he describe the event in literal terms. However, the narrative is plain enough when understood within the context of the first and second Passovers. The narration is found in chapters 7 through 9. Chapter 9 begins by describing the fall to earth of a star from heaven. Star is the Greek term for a planet. The name of the planet is explicitly identified later in the chapter. This star, later identified as an angel, was given the key to the bottomless pit. The key gave the planetary angel power to hurt and torment mankind and the earth with smoke and scorpions. The sun and air were darkened by reason of the smoke. This is a continuation of the woe described in chapter 8, where another star, called wormwood, darkened the sun, moon, and stars. John identifies this angel as Abaddon and Apollyon. Both names identify the angel as the destroying angel. The Greek name also identifies the star's name in recognizable form. Apollyon is Apollo, is Mars. This planetary angel is the destroying angel of the Exodus and the Apocalypse. During the Exodus, those Israelites who were saved from the final plague, the plague of the firstborn, did so by smearing lamb's blood on the doorposts and lintel at the command of the Lord. During the Apocalypse, those who will be saved from the plagues of the destroyer will obey the word of wisdom. John doesn't call the future Passover a Passover. Instead, he describes those who will be saved as having the seal of God on their foreheads. Those with the seal of God on their foreheads will be spared of the hurt and death caused by the destroying angel. They will be passed over. Before the plagues and woes even begin, an angel ascending from the east with the seal of the living God cried to the four angels standing on the four corners of the earth, commanding them to not hurt the earth, the sea, or the trees until he had sealed the servants of God. Those who will be sealed are numbered according to the sacred numerology of the planetary archetypes, a subject we have addressed previously. There will be 12,000 sealed from each of the 12 tribes. The purpose of the seal will be to protect the servants of God from any harm due to the upcoming calamities. They are to be passed over by the destroying angel. The seal is simply a symbolic indicator of those who will obey the word of wisdom and be protected from harm or death from the destroying angel. Unlike the first Passover, where the promised protection was given after the first 9 plagues had wreaked havoc on Egyptian and Israelite alike, the seal signifying the promise is given before all the plagues and woes caused by the destroying angel, Mars. The angels were told not to destroy anything or any living being before the seal was in place. Now, this means that the future Passover will protect all those with the seal from all the woes documented by John. After all, the promise in the word of wisdom does not say that the destroying angel will pass over the saints for any specific plague. It is a blanket promise. The promise of safety given to the saints for obedience to the word of wisdom sets a very low bar. The word of wisdom, as the Lord explained, is adapted to the capacity of the weakest of saints. The Lord does not ask much for his protection. He simply asks the saints and the weak of the world to conform to his health plan, something they should do for their own benefit anyway. This low bar is in harmony with the first Passover, where all the Lord required the Israelites to do was to smear lamb's blood on the doorposts. The second Passover will occur before the opening of the gate of heaven and the appearance of the sign of the Son of Man. And we know this because John's revelation gives the sequencing of the great events of the apocalypse, including the second Passover, the opening of the gate of heaven, and the appearance of the great sign. To begin, we must point out that, independent of John's revelation, we already know in part the sequencing of the appearance of the sign of the Son of Man. For the sign to appear, 3 planets and their associated phenomena must be present above Earth's north pole. These planets are Mars, Venus, and Saturn. The axis mundi and Saturnian crescent must also be present. John's revelation provides a sequential account of the restoration of these planets and phenomena. Mars is the first to appear on the scene. John describes the appearance of the red planet as a great star falling to Earth from heaven and burning like a lamp. He calls the star Wormwood, a name associated with Mars. John then describes Mars as another star falling from heaven. This is not a different star. He describes the star as the angel of the bottomless pit and gives it the Greek name of Apollyon. Venus next appears as the Christian version of the Queen of Heaven, the female planet's most recognizable and worldwide mythic form. The last on the scene will be the planet Saturn, descending from heaven as the New Jerusalem. Now, with the return of Mars, the world mountain, the axis mundi, will be formed between the red planet and the Earth. The first explicit appearance of the axis mundi is the appearance of the great red dragon. Later, as the red dust in the axis mundi recedes, it appears as a more transparent sea of glass, mingled with a red fire-like color. Lastly, the polar axis appears completely clear and transparent, like unto gold and crystal glass. The return of the cometary Venus will provide the plasma streamers that will form the streets and gates of the city. When Saturn returns, so will the crescent, the lighting of the sun on the ringed planet. The crescent will form the gate of heaven when it is at its lowest and brightest point. Now, as Saturn and the other planets of the polar configuration rotate, Saturn will open, in turn, each gate of the heavenly city. When the crescent reaches its lowest point on April 6th, the door of the heavenly temple will open and the sign of the Son of Man will appear. The opening of the heavenly temple and appearance of the great sign of the Son of Man will occur after the terrible destructions caused by the return of the planets and before the return of Jesus Christ. Joseph Smith's restoration of chapter 24 of Matthew provides a general sequence of events. His disciples asked Jesus about the future when he went upon the Mount of Olives. His answer was lengthy and specific. He first gave a general overview of the global tumult that would arise in the latter days. There will be false Christs and prophets, apostasy and betrayal in the church, and persecution of the saints. Jesus then informs his disciples that when they shall see the abomination of desolation, the planet Mars, he warns them to stand in the holy place, a topic we have covered elsewhere. And with the coming of the abomination of desolation and its overwhelming destructive power, mankind will flee to presumed safety. The tribulation will be the worst the Lord has ever sent upon Israel. It will kill so many on earth that there would be no human left, except that the Lord will cut it short for the elect's sake. The Lord then reiterates that there will be false Christs and false prophets, adding that they shall show great signs and wonders, deceiving all but the very elect. He informed his disciples that he is saying this to protect the elect. Jesus then speaks of the wars and rumors of wars. There will be both civil and global upheaval. Amidst the global chaos, the sign of the Son of Man will appear. According to the Savior, this sign will authenticate the true Christ. It is a sign and wonder the false Christs cannot imitate. At this point in his narrative, Jesus gives a parable of the gathering of Israel. The tribes will return as eagles who gather around a carcass. We will discuss the great gathering in future videos. Again, speaking for the benefit of his elect, the Lord describes a second series of human and planetary conflict and calamity, just prior to the end of the world. The end of the world will come after the gospel of the kingdom is preached in all the world for the last time. For our immediate purpose, the Lord next gives the sequence of great events prior to and including his second coming. First, the abomination of desolation, Mars, will arrive, bringing global tribulation, darkening the sun and moon, and shaking the powers of heaven, the planets. The first event will be the return of Mars. The second event will be Mars bringing terrible destruction. Following the tribulation of those days in heaven and on earth, the sign of the Son of Man will appear, seen by all mankind, causing them to mourn. The sign of the Son of Man will appear, meaning that the planets of the polar configuration will return with the scattered tribes on them. Though the planets will return, the gathering of Israel will not be complete merely by their return. This will be the next step in the great events that will transpire. As we will explain in future videos, the parable of the fig tree is a parable about the gathering. All these events precede the actual return of the man, Jesus Christ. In fact, these events will give the elect to know that the return of Jesus Christ is near, even at the doors. This sequence makes perfect sense. Before the king can arrive and accept his kingdom, the earth must be cleansed by means of the calamities. The world must be cleared of the wicked. Second, the future king's righteous subjects, Israel and the 10 tribes, must return to his kingdom. These events, like the Great Deluge, will take the world by surprise and unprepared. The world will be unprepared, in spite of the warning to watch and be ready. The point of his discourse is to prepare the elect. Those who heed the warnings and prepare will be blessed and become rulers. However, not all servants of the Lord will heed the warning. These servants, like the world, will be surprised. They will be appointed with the hypocrites and the wicked, and cut off from the true servants of the Lord, thus fulfilling the prophecy of Moses. As the Lord suggests, this is not the end of the world. Later, by and by, as the Lord puts it, the gospel will be again preached to all nations, followed by the destruction of the wicked and the end of the world.